Welcome to Balaso's YouTube channel. Today I'll be teaching you class 10 chapter 1 gravitation part 1. Don't forget to subscribe our channel. A red button is given below. Just click the red button if you like the video. Gravitation. Gravitation was discovered by Sir Isaac Newton. Once Sir Isaac Newton was sitting under a tree. An apple fell in his head. Newton discovered the force by seeing an apple fall from a tree on the ground. He wondered why all apples fall vertically downward, not at any other angle. So, why do they not fly off in the horizontal direction? After much thought, he came to the conclusion that the earth must be attracting the apple towards itself, and this attractive force must be directed towards the center of the earth. The direction of the apple on the tree to the center of the earth is the vertical direction at the position of the apple, and thus the apple falls vertically downward. The force on an apple on the tree is towards the center of the earth. You can see the force here. This is the center of the earth. The force on an apple is towards the center of the earth. So the figure also shows that gravitational force between the earth and the moon. So Newton thought that if the force of gravitation acts on apple on the tree at a different height from the surface of the earth, can it also act on objects at even greater height much farther away from the earth? Like, for example, the moon. Can it act on even farther objects like the other planets and the sun? Let's introduce a scientist. Great scientist, that is Sir Isaac Newton, born on 1642, died in 1727, was one of the greatest scientists of recent time. He was born in England. He gave his law of motion, equation of motion, and theory of gravity in his book Principia. So this is a book which is called as Principia. Before this book was written, Kepler had given 3 laws describing planetary motion. However, the reason why planets move in the way described by Kepler's law was not known. Newton, with his theory of gravity, mathematically derived Kepler's law. In addition to this, Newton did groundbreaking work in several areas, including light, heat, sound, and mathematics. He invented a new branch of mathematics. This is called calculus and has wide-ranging applications in physics and mathematics. He was the first scientist to construct a reflecting telescope. Circular motion and centripetal force. Let us watch the video. Centripetal force. Now, what do you mean by centripetal force? Let's take for an example, you take a stone. You take a string and tie it. You tie the stone and just try to rotate it. As long as we are holding the string, we are pulling the stone towards the center of the circle. Now let's say, now this is your hand. Now here the stone is. Now when you are rotating, it rotates. It is in a circular motion, but this is in the center of the circle, and we are applying a force towards it. The force stops acting if we release the string, and in this case the stone will fly off along a straight line, so which is in a tangent to the circle at the position of the stone, because that is the direction of the velocity at that instant of time. So centripetal force is a force act on any object moving along a circle, and it is directed towards the center of the circle. Now the force, which this is an object, if this is a stone, and if the force acts on any object, it's moving on a circle and it is directed towards the center of the circle. So we call this force as a centripetal force. Now you know that the moon, which is a natural satellite, this is the earth, this is the moon. The moon, which is a natural satellite of the earth, it goes round in a definite orbit. It goes round in a definite orbit, and which is a circular motion. Now the direction of the motion of the moon as well as the speed constantly changes during the motion. So do you think some force is constantly acting on the moon? Now it is clear that for the moon to go around the earth, there must be a force which is exerted on the moon, and this force must be exerted by the earth, which attracts the moon towards itself. Similarly, for the sun must be attracting the planets, including the earth, towards itself. And this force, we call it as centripetal force. Kepler's law. There are three Kepler's law. Kepler's first law. The orbit of a planet is an ellipse with the sun at one of the foci. Here you can see the planet. This is an ellipse. This is the sun, which is at foci. Sun, the planet moves from A to B, B to C, C to D, D to E, E to F, and again F to A. So here there is only one foci, and that is the sun. Let us watch the video for Kepler's first law. Kepler's first law. Now what does Kepler's first law states? The orbit of a planet is an ellipse with the sun at one of the foci. Now let me tell you what you mean by ellipse. You take a cone and cut it in an inclined plane. Now this inclined plane, this shape is called as an ellipse. Now let's take for example, this is the sun and this is the orbit of the planet. So the orbit of the planet is an ellipse with the sun at one of the foci. Foci means inside an ellipse, when there is a point inside, we call that point as a foci. Here this orbit is an ellipse and the sun is a foci. So Kepler's first law states that the orbit of a planet is an ellipse with the sun at one of the foci. Kepler's second law. The line joining the planet and the sun sweeps equal area in equal interval of time. You see that, let's take a planet move from this place to this place for 1 month, and again it comes here, moves from here to here for 1 month. The time is same, but you can see the blue color, these are the areas, both the areas are equal. Let us see the video. Kepler's second law. What does Kepler's second law states? The line joining the planet and the sun sweeps equal area in equal interval of time. Now just you can see the planet A. The planet moved from A to B, B to C, C to D, D to E, and E to F. Now here AB and CD are the distance covered. Let's say the planet, when it goes from A to B, it takes 1 day. Similarly, C to D, it takes 1 day. E to F, it takes 1 day. But what you observe is the time is equal for all the three, but the distance, you can see the distance. When you calculate the distance and the area is also equal. So the line joining the planet and the sun sweeps equal area in equal interval of time. Just you can see by seeing this, this is smaller, this is bigger, this is very thin, but this area and this area and this area are equal in equal interval of time. Let's say this is 1 day from A to B, 1 day from C to D, 1 day from E to F. It takes equal area in equal interval of time. Now 1 day means a planet moves from A to B for 1 day. A planet moves from C to D for 1 day. A planet moves from E to F for 1 day. Kepler's third law. The square of its period of revolution around the sun is directly proportional to the cube of the mean distance of a planet from the sun. Now T is the period of revolution and R is the mean distance. So here T square upon R cube is equal to constant, and that is equal to K. Let's see the video for Kepler's third law. Kepler's third law. What does Kepler's third law states? The square of its period of revolution around the sun is directly proportional to the cube of the mean distance of a planet from the sun. Now the square of the period of revolution, the period of revolution is our time t. Now this square of this t is directly proportional, you can see a directly proportional to the cube of the mean distance of a planet from the sun. That means if this is a planet, so the distance between the planet and the sun is the mean distance. So t square is proportional to r cube. That is, r is the mean distance.
Go!
Kepler's third law. Now what does Kepler's third law states? Kepler's third law states that the square of its period of revolution around the sun is directly proportional to the cube of the mean distance of a planet from the sun. Now our period of revolution is our t. Our mean distance is our r. R is the distance and period of revolution is t. Now the mean distance of a planet from a sun, from the planet to the sun, the distance we call it as r. So here, according to Kepler's third law, square of the period of revolution, that is t square, directly proportional to cube of the mean distance. So you have taken the cube of the mean distance. Our mean distance is r of the planet from the sun. So t square upon r cube is equal to constant, and our constant is k. Therefore k is equal to t square upon r cube. This is our Kepler's third law. Newton's universal law of gravitation. Newton's universal law of gravitation. Now after Kepler's law, Newton has formulated his theory for universal gravity. Now, according to this theory, every object in the universe attracts every other object with a definite force. Now, you can see here, let's take mass 1 and mass 2. Now, this mass 1 and mass 2, both the mass, they attract each other with a definite force at a distance of d. This force is directly proportional to the product of the mass of the two objects and inversely proportional to the square of the distance between them. Let's say F is the force. Now this force is directly proportional to the product. Product means multiplication. So the two mass M1 and M2, which are directly proportional to the product of the two masses and inversely proportional to the square of the distance between them. So F is directly proportional to M1 M2 upon d square. Now this d square is inversely proportional and M1 M2 is directly proportional. So this is universal law of gravitation. F is directly proportional to M1 M2 upon d square. Now here, if I remove the proportionality sign, it will be F is equal to, if you remove the proportionality sign, you have to put some constant, and I am putting the constant as G. So G M1 and M2 upon d square. Now what is this G? Your G is the constant of proportionality, and this G we call it as universal gravitational constant. Your G is the universal gravitational constant. Let's talk about the unit for G. The unit for G in SI system is Newton meter square kg raised to minus 2. Now this is the unit, SI unit for G. The value for the G is 6.673 into 10 raised to minus 11 Newton meter square kg raised to minus 2.
So what does the above law means? The above law means that if the mass of one object is double, what will happen? The force between the two objects also doubles. Okay, if the distance is doubled, d, if the distance is doubled, the force decreases by a factor of 4. So if the two bodies are spherical, see here, can you see this? If the two bodies are spherical, then the direction of the force is always along the line joining the center of the two bodies, and the distance between them is taken to be d. In case, let's say, if the two bodies are not spherical, then they have an irregular shape, then the direction of the force is along the line joining their center of masses, and d is taken to be the distance between the two center of masses. Newton's inverse square law. Now this Newton's inverse square law is in your board exam, it comes with the Kepler's 3 law. So after writing the Kepler's 3 law, you have to derive this equation, that is Newton's inverse square law. See the video, learn the equation, how to solve it.
Uniform circular motion, magnitude of centrifugal force. Inverse square law. Now let us say m is the mass of an object. Let's say it is an object. V is the speed. R is the radius of a circle. So force is equal to mv square upon r. Instead of object, let us take a planet and a sun. Then m is the mass of the planet, v is the speed, r is the distance from the sun. So the distance travelled by the planet in one revolution is equal to 2 pi r. You know that the when we take a circle, the circumference of a circle is 2 pi r. So here also, when the planet takes one revolution, it is one circumference. So we take the distance as 2 pi r. So speed is equal to distance upon time. Speed is v, distance is your 2 pi r, and t is the time. V is equal to 2 pi r upon t. Now we are putting the value of t in f is equal to mv square upon r. So therefore, if m is equal to mv square upon r, f is equal to m, and your v is 2 pi r upon t the whole square upon r. So f is equal to m into square of t is 4 pi square r square upon t square into this r. So f is equal to, now you know that Kepler's third law is t square upon r square, t square upon r cube is equal to k. So here I need r cube. I already have a t square, so I multiply this by r on both the sides. So I get f is equal to 4 m pi square r square, and r is r cube upon r square and t square. Now this part is your k, where I have taken that k is equal to t square upon r cube. So that f is equal to 4 m pi square upon r square into this. If k is t square upon r cube, then what is r cube upon t square? It is 1 upon k. So f is equal to 4 m pi square. I take this k here and r square here into 1 upon r square. Now here f is constant. So f is proportional to 1 upon r square, where I'll take this as k or constant 4 pi m pi square n upon k is equal to constant. So our answer is, this is the inverse square law. F is inversely proportional to the square of the distance. So here Newton concluded that the centrifugal force, which is the force acting on the planet, is responsible for its circular motion, and that force is inversely proportional to the square of the distance between the planet and the sun. So Newton identified this force with the force of gravity, and hence postulated the inverse square law of gravitation. This gravitational force is much weaker than the force in nature, but it controls the universe and decides its future. This is possible because of the huge masses of planets, stars, and other constitution of the universe.
Solved examples from your textbook. Mahendra and Virat are sitting at a distance of 1 meter from each other. You can see this. These two Mahendras and Virats, they are sitting at a 1 meter from a distance. Their masses are 75 kg and 80 kg respectively. What is the gravitational force between them? That means these two person, Mahendra and Virat, we want to find the gravitational force, the attraction, force of attraction. So given R is 1 meter as it is given here, mass M1 is 75 kg, M2 is 80 kg, and G is constant 6.67 into 10 raised to minus 11 Newton meter square per kg square, or you can write Newton meter square kg raised to minus 2. Now according to the Newton's law, universal law of constant, F is equal to G M1 M2 upon R square. Value of G, value of M1 and value of M2 and value of R. Put it, solve it, you will get F is equal to 4.002 into 10 raised to minus 7 Newton. Now 10 raised to minus 7, the value is very small, that the gravitational force between them is very small. So if the force of the frictional between Mahendra and the bench on which he is sitting is 0, if the force is 0, then he will start moving towards Virat under the action of this force. But we can calculate his acceleration and the velocity by using Newton's law of motion. Next example is, in the same example, assume that the bench on which Mahendra is sitting is frictionless, starting with 0 velocity. What will Mahendra's velocity of motion towards Virat after 1 second? Will the velocity change with time, and how? Now force on Mahendra F is 4.002 into 10 raised to minus 7 Newton, which you found out previously. Mahendra's mass is 75 kg. So according to Newton's second law, the acceleration produced by the force on Mahendra is A is equal to F upon m. That is, you know that force is equal to mass into acceleration. So acceleration is equal to force upon mass. Put the value. You will get 5.34 into 10 raised to minus 9 meter per second square. Now using the Newton's first equation, V is equal to U plus AT. Let's find here, as Mahendra is sitting on the bench, his initial velocity is 0, so U is 0. Put the 0 here. So V is equal to 0 plus acceleration you found at 5.34 into 10 raised to minus 9, and your time is 1 second. So V is 5.34 into 10 raised to minus 9 meter per second. So that means Mahendra's velocity after 1 second is 5.34 into 10 raised to minus 9 meter per second. So this is extremely very small. The velocity will increase with time because of the acceleration. So the acceleration will also not remain constant, because as Mahendra moves towards Virat, the distance between them will decrease, causing an increase in the gravitational force, thereby increasing the acceleration as per Newton's second law of motion. Have you heard about high tide and low tide? So let's discuss about it. You must be knowing that the high tide and the low tides that occurs regularly in the sea. The level of the sea water at any given location along seashore increases and decreases twice a day, but a regular interval of time. The high tide and the low tide occurs at different time at different places. So why this happens? How this high tide and low tide happens? The level of water in the sea changes because of the gravitational force exerted by the moon. So the moon's gravitation is exerted here in the earth. So the water directly under the moon, it gets pulled towards the moon, and the level of water goes up. You can see the difference here. The level of water goes up, causing a high tide. And here you can see the low tide. High tide because it is near the moon, here the low tide. So at the two places on the earth at 90 degree, you can see this 90 degree. From the place of the high tide, the level of water is minimum and low tide occurs as it is shown in the figure. So gravitational force keeps all of us attracted towards the center of the earth, and this gravitational force on the moon that pulls the earth's object like water towards the moon. High tide means water level rises and low tide means water level comes down. This is the end of part 1 video. Watch the next video, part 2. Don't forget to subscribe my YouTube channel. Thank you.